They did comment that this guidance is not to regulate the practice of tattooing itself, that it's for the manufacturers and the products. So it leads me to wonder how they're going to approach that in the future, because we know they're sitting in the meetings, we know they're listening, and we know other groups are working on the tattooing practice itself. Beyond that, though, if they're just going after the products, how does that affect the process, right? How does that affect tattooing itself? Does it drive prices? Does it take away a fair market? Does it increase the risk like we saw happen in Europe? So those are all going to be important. And I got to say, the APT is going to play a vital role moving forward in this, because there needs to be a unified voice. We need to be able to tell congressmen and women how many tattoo shops are in their district, how many people have tattoos in their district. They want to know that. They ask that all the time. Or can you tell me how many shops I have in my district? No, but the APT probably can. So it's going to play a vital role that we have some kind of unified voice. But starting that dialogue right now is probably the most important thing we could do.
I'm curious where this conversation will kind of go. We spoke on the phone about a lot of things, and I know the focus of this is that newest FDA guidance document, which is something we want to kind of flush out and kind of discuss. So maybe to lead us into it, Sean, what do you want to get out of the conversation today?
I think you're on point. We just need to really kind of flush through it a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Just kind of start dissecting it. I have some interesting pieces of it that I think are telling of what's coming. And so I think getting that message out and get people to start talking about it, really. Like I think getting some dialogue going is the best thing we could think about getting out of this.
So good point. What do we want people to start talking about? So what we're talking about is an FDA guidance document that was published real recent. So an FDA guidance document that was issued in October. It was the final guidance on tattoo inks from the FDA. Now, just some background. This was a document that was trying to espouse the most effective way to mitigate any sort of cross-contamination issues or contamination of tattoo inks. And this document had a rough draft in the past that our collective efforts were working with the Association of Food and Drug Officials Body Art Committee, right? We were going through and suggesting some edits to it because we've obviously had an opportunity to preview this before it was published. But a lot of the edits were potentially left out. And so that is a telling thing, right? Like they're asking for, and they, speaking about the FDA, is asking for feedback from industry, right? Because the AFDO group consists with a lot of industry members, whether it be practitioners in the tattoo field, permanent cosmetic realm, body piercing, and even from the manufacturers, that they're asking for feedback, but then not fully deploying or employing it into their document. And so I think that's a good piece that could be telling, is that they want our feedback, but they're not really listening to it. And correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, if that's on point or a little off.
Yeah, that's certainly what it feels like right now, right? In June of 2023, the FDA issued the draft guidance for this, and it was for tattoo ink manufacturers, right? AFDO got it, and I believe it was like July 10th or something. AFDO had their first meeting over this guidance on comments and things, and we went through quite a few different renditions. And right now, to be fair, let me back up a little bit. I haven't had a chance to speak to any of the AFDO members and see kind of how they feel yet. So working on getting the complete background done. But basically they did submit comments to the FDA over this, primarily over what tattooing is, the definition of tattooing, the term injection versus deposited or placement, and a few other minor things. Now, this final guidance that came out just a few days ago doesn't seem to really have all that in there, or no real changes from the draft guidance that came out in June of last year. So that is kind of telling, and it's curious as to why. And that's one of the things I want to try to figure out and try to push the FDA to come back and tell us why they didn't take those comments, why they didn't use the comments. I'm also trying to find out how many comments were made overall from the community, because that will tell us kind of engagement levels and also response times and response from the FDA. So one of the things, that we really pushed for through AFDO was the term injection. We don't believe that tattoos are injected, right? Mm-hmm. And we had that, went to medical doctors, talked to them about that, had it peer reviewed, went through this entire process that AFDO required in order to get it submitted to the FDA. And we submitted it. And we said it's deposited. There's even videos out there that kind of show this happening, that it's not being injected into the tissue. And the FDA still claims that it's injected. They're using injection as a term to describe the process of introducing the tattoo pigment. And then they're turning around and using depositing to describe how the needle is actually puncturing the skin. So it gets a little bit confusing, right? So one of the things that we need to talk about and we need to work on is, what did AFDO do? All the steps that they went through. What did the FDA do in response? What did all the other comments look like? And are they really trying to work with the industry, or are they just taking all these European models? Because they tons of reference to Europe in this document, right? And just using that. And then what is the outcome of this? Because let's remember, the FDA has not issued their final rule over MoCRA yet. We could expect that early next year sometime, possibly after, elections happen and everybody's kind of settled into office. We could start to see a draft guidance, or expect to see the draft guidance of their final rule. And that's going to be really important, that we get the engagement we need when that draft guidance comes out. And we got to not only get the engagement, but we got to figure out why the FDA wasn't listening in the first place. How do we get them to listen now? Because once that rule's made, that's law, right? These guidances are just what they are. They're guidance. You don't have to follow the guidance. You probably should follow them, but you don't have to. When the rule comes out, you have to follow the rule.
Yeah, no, I think that's so good. And I'm glad you brought that up, because right before we started, Sean, Forrest and I were just talking about when MoCRA first came out in early 2023, it was like this knee jerk, like, oh crap, there's something going on. We need to make some effort, some change. We need to come together, unify. We saw the surge in, the Alliance membership, and we saw this action. And then obviously things don't work as exciting in the government realm, right? Things in the government realm move at a snail's pace. And there's so many different bureaucratic steps that must be taken to make something into a foundational rule or law that we will have to follow regardless. And I think that's where we're at right now. Is we see these draft guidances, we see these medical reports, we see these things trickling through, but nothing's as like, well, now you need to make this change. There's nothing drastically ahead of us. And I think the community really needs to, as you said, start talking about and engaging with these steps, because these steps are leading to a solid decision that, we say we want it to happen. We could imagine it happening sometime early next year after the election, but we don't know that, right? It's government, right? It could continue to push forward, and that'll get people losing interest, right? And then if we're not there making ourselves known, if we're not there making our opinions known, then they won't hear them, right? They'll offer us opportunities, just like this AFDO opportunity to offer some input. But why didn't it fully take? Why didn't they fully absorb it and use it all? Right? Is it because of the lack of our attention to it? Like we put out a draft guidance, but we didn't bug them with media, right? We didn't say, we just put it in there, we want to see it in the FDA. And I think it's important that we do get people's awareness that it's about having that constituent base that's making a lot of noise, right? That they are talking to their congressmen or congresswomen or representatives saying hey, we just want to be in the know and we want to talk to you about it, right? And I mean, that's the purpose of things like the APT, right? Is be that recognized voice. But we also need people just to start sharing this information and realize that it's going to affect them drastically. Because if we get put in that realm, if we get put in that realm where tattooing is now looked at as an injection, like talk about taking us into the medical field, right?
Yeah.
And something as drastic as like what's in Japan, where you require a medical license to do tattooing. Like imagine if they try and pull that crap here. And if we say nothing about it, we do nothing about it. I mean, we have no idea what could come about. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And the term injection also gets us wrapped up in other regulations out there, not just MoCRA, right?
mm-hmm,
Color
mm-hmm,
additive rule and law is one that it gets us wrapped in. And,
mm-hmm.
The color additive law says that you cannot inject any color additives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tattoo pigment's a color additive, according to the feds. So it wraps us up in there too. So I don't know what else is going on, but one thing I do want to call out that's important in this final guidance is that they did comment that this guidance is not to regulate the practice of tattooing itself, that it's for the manufacturers and the products, right? So it leads me to wonder how they're going to approach that in the future, because we know they're sitting in the meetings, we know they're listening, and we know other groups are working on the tattooing practice itself. Beyond that, though, if they're just going after the products, how does that affect the process, right? How does that affect tattooing itself? Does it drive prices? Does it take away a fair market? Does it increase the risk like we saw happen in Europe? We're seeing increased risk in getting tattooed in Europe because of the law. Right. So those are all going to be important. And I got to say, the APT is going to play a vital role moving forward in this, because there needs to be a unified voice. We need to be able to tell congressmen and women how many tattoo shops are in their district, how many people have tattoos in their district. They want to know that. They ask that all the time. Or can you tell me how many shops I have in my district? No, but the APT probably can, So it's going to play a vital role that we have some kind of unified voice. But starting that dialogue right now is probably the most important thing we can do.
Yeah. How do you start a dialogue about one of the most boring topics ever?
Yeah. Yeah, right.
It's like the most will drastically shift your world, but God, it's boring to talk about at times, because it's like, government and political jargon is just so hard to digest and process. And, you're trying to do that for us, right? You said they're always asking all the time, Sean, we've talked about it in the past, but you're engaging with a lot of those who are responsible for making laws and regulations on Capitol Hill, like maybe whatever you're able to share about that, maybe kind of speak to that a little bit. And then I'd like to talk about the European thing too.
But I've been on the Hill speaking since the days of the Coalition for Tattoo Safety, and then it went on to just working for Eternal, and then the broader Nexus group. We need more people doing it. We need more people engaged on the Hill for sure. The overall response that we get when we're there is pretty positive on both sides of the aisle. We get people from both parties that are fully tattooed and heavily tattooed and believe that this is kind of an outrageous direction that the FDA is going, because they see no major harm in tattooing. There's been no major health crisis. And so they're kind of curious why the FDA is going after this so much. That's pretty much the biggest response we get. A lot of support up there. There are some congressmen I've talked to that have full body suits. You wouldn't know while they're wearing their business suit, but they're heavily tattooed and engaged. So that's a good thing.
That's cool.
There's a congressman we spoke to from the Los Angeles area that his son's an apprentice, so he's heavily engaged in it. So we definitely have allies, but we need more people to go there. We need more people to even write letters. That would help a lot. Let them know how many of us are out there that have tattoos or enjoy tattoos or are advocates for tattooing. We really got to try to get that engagement going with Capitol Hill, because they definitely are the ones that can help us if the FDA is not listening to anything we're saying.
That's so important. I mean, it's cool to hear that, right? Up in Capitol Hill, there's full body suits running around. There's, tattooing in the family, and there's support. And I think it's great to hear that. And simultaneously, people need to know that that's nice. Oh no, they got it. They're good. We don't need to do nothing. No. We actually got to show up too. Like you said, writing letters is a great way to, being able to show that numerical support, but it is important for people to know that they do need to do something about this. And I don't know if it's just a general lack of, I mean, who likes to deal with government stuff? Who likes to show up for stuff like that? I mean, it is
It
the
goes
few who
against
tend
every
to do
grain
that.
in our DNA, man, as tattooers. To be
Yeah,
honest,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, I don't want to do that.
trust me, it's hard to crack a
Um,
smile sometimes on Capitol Hill. Trust me, but you gotta, go in positive. Like I'm
yeah,
here.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, and yeah, it does it. It feels like it can be soul sucking at times, but it's it is necessary because I mean, if you know some of the telling signs you said of looking like stuff that's happening in Europe, just really kind of talking to that specifically, when we were originally blown away by the potential for this new bill, MoCRA, to adopt European standards. Like then we started really delving into it, talking to our European counterparts, and like you mentioned, pricing, right? Like how pricing for tattooing has gone out the roof, and access to quality inks is gone away, right? They're limited on what they can access. They can't access the pigments that we use in the United States. I mean, we're talking like what, 50,000 euro fine, 3 years in jail if you get caught using it, right? So then they're required to use this European standard ink, REACH compliant tattoo inks. That there was that recall in Germany, right? Because they were having some sort of weird reactions to it. Because again, it's stuff we don't understand. They're just changing products and then giving it to people to then place in the skin, right? And of course, they're going to have some sort of reaction to that. And I don't think people still grasp that, like how is that going to affect tattooing? Well, it's going to make your product suck. Right? Not only are you going to have to navigate increased prices and lack of quality stuff, you're going to create these tattoos that are going to be like,
yeah,
your clients will be like, I don't like that. Like it's not popping like it once was, or it's not, why do I have these weird bumps in it? You know what I mean? Like, I think it's important for people to recognize that. And that's a direct repercussion of not showing up and writing a fucking letter, right? Like it's tough to put those
yeah,
two things together.
yeah. Another call out on this guidance is they talk a lot about microbial contamination, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nowhere in any law or rule does it say that tattoo pigment has to be sterile.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Nowhere does it say it has to be sterile. However, they keep implying microbial, microbial, microbial. Not all microbes are bad, right? Now, I understand
Sure.
you have microbes on you, Ben, that could be harmful to me on my skin, right? We know that. That's a known fact, vice versa. And, it's called transient bacteria. And so we do want it to be free from everything we could make it free from. And sterilizing it is probably the best method. I'll say, back that up. It is the best method, right? It's the best practice is sterilizing the pigment. But nowhere in any of these documents does it say that tattoo manufacturers have to sterilize their product. And instead of saying pathogenic contamination, they go to microbial contamination. So what that tells me, because they keep repeating it and they keep focusing on the GMP standards, like the different ISO levels, is that in the rule that they actually finally published, we might see more of that. We might actually see that tattoo pigment has to be sterile now, right? We might see that instead of just your normal GMP standards, you need to use the cosmetic GMP standards because they made several references to it in this guidance. So I really think that they're trying to prime the pump a little bit for the rule that's to come. And so the engagement level right now has to be elevated so that they hear us as the industry and they hear us as the experts and they don't do what they did to Europe to us, right? Like that's the last thing we want here in the US is to go up all these European models that we know are vastly overstated, incomplete, and just at this point, just garbage, to say the least. So we definitely need to engage to the fullest extent that we can right now. Given it's election time, right, and all that's changing on the Hill in January. So right now is the time to get ready for the engagement. Get letter templates out to fellow artists to talk about it, to start to have the tough discussions, to have the civil discourse, and work out more of a unified voice. Becoming a pirate in this and just opening up private studio and trying to hide, you're still going to be affected. So it doesn't matter where you go in tattooing. We're a victim of our own success at this point. And so we need to own it and take care of business.
Yeah, you're right. It's gonna no matter where you're at, you need supplies, you need ink. Unless you can go back to the age-old task of conjuring up your own pigment and making your own ink, you're going to be reliant on manufacturers, and if they're under fire, not able to produce the good quality products, then that'll affect everyone, no matter where you're at, private studio or regular studio. Now, I want to talk directly, specifically coming from Sean. You're a tattoo artist. You're a long-time tattooer, but you're also working with manufacturers. You're working with Capitol Hill, and myself personally being really involved with like the public relations and the Alliance of Professional Tattoos, and engaging with the general tattoo artist population. And that very issue of, like you said, getting more engagement and action is like trying to get a cat to bark. You know what I'm saying? Like it's trying to it's almost impossible at times with certain things, like to get tattoo artists to want to participate, because there is that mentality like, no, bro, I'll just, I'm out. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it's like trying to find those solutions. A couple of solutions we have that we're working on. Like I love that you're saying like great. We could set out some letter templates, and people would just sign their name kind of thing. We have started an online platform, the Circle platform, where it's like an online community where we can have these dialogue and this communication and this discourse. We're trying to urge people to. If you're already a member, come join. If you're not a member, join so you can participate in it. We're putting out this information like this FDA draft guidance. We'll be putting this content on there too, so people can review it and learn what they need to do. But I think it's trying to identify truly what can and motivate artists to want to participate. And even with government regulation, like it's like people don't want to deal with it until they have to deal with it. You know what I mean? Until they get that fine in the mail, or that, like, what do you mean I can't buy this anymore? Then they want to do something about it. It's trying to think of those other solutions to make more proactive participation happen. Right? Then I think that's going to be where it just needs to be shared. Like we talked about before we hopped on this call. How do you make complex FDA draft guidance sexy and understandable? Like, hey, if you want to listen to that, like FDA, draft guidance. That sounds boring. It's like continuing to try to find the ways to make it digestible by not just the tattoo artist, but like even the general public, right? And I think a huge piece is we've been trying to talk to tattoo artists a lot, but what will truly make a tattoo artist change their ways is work and business, right? And what are their clients wanting? We gravitate towards styles and trends because that's what our clients are asking for. I want to get this new watercolor thing, like when that was popular, or remember the days of travel.
Cherry Creek.
I think it's important. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Or Huck Spalding Flash, maybe. But you know what I mean? Like getting the public alerted and aware, I think, is important, because if they're like, hey, like, what's going on with this? Is my tattoo artist proactive with this? That'll make them go like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm active, like I'm working on it too, I'm participating, so I think it's important for us to start diversifying who we're enacting, because there's people want to collect tattoos. They want to make sure they're getting good quality, safe tattoos, right? From reputable.
It's powerful. The end user, right? It's all the end user. That's what it's always about. The collector, right? Mm-hmm. Whether that's you, whether that's a client. I mean, that's definitely who we need to get engaged as well. And most of the end users I talk to, most of the clients I talk to, don't understand. They're just like the guys ladies on Capitol Hill. They don't understand why this is a big deal, right? They don't understand why the FDA is doing this, instead of focusing on things like food that we all consume and things like that. But they just have no idea. And so if we figure out a creative way to get more engagement from the clients, I think that's a powerful tool. It's a powerful way to get some lessons.
We got a really badass end user in the same room right with us right now. This man's Forrest's got quite the body of work, and
Yeah.
I think he likes tats. I think he's kind of a fan.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be pretty
I
pissed
guess
myself to be affected. That's for sure.
yeah. Well, what like just to add you into the dialogue a little bit, Forrest. As an end user, what do you think could be shared with the client that would stimulate more action by the tattoo artist by the means of, you know, like if your client's coming and asking these questions, you want to have the answers, right? I mean,
Yeah. It seems like because I heard you guys talking about like first it affecting manufacturers, then the practitioners. So it seems like it kind of like trickles down, like the materials obviously affects the practitioners and then would affect the client. So again, it's sort of the same challenge of like struggling to get them to understand how it will affect them and when, and being proactive about it. But really, I guess there's that direct comparison of reach. So sort of like maybe highlighting whatever issues that clients are facing over there, just the ambiguity of like the quality of the products. It's kind of like makes me think of like some sort of marketing technique of like the truth campaign about like the dangers of tobacco, or like something about like prohibition of like, hey, be active now unless you want to, like sort of scare tactics in a way of like, it's something we all know and love. And we're always so freely able to go and get a tattoo, just search something out and go get something done that day if you want. But really that experience that everyone knows and loves, and the luxury of it could very well become at risk, or even change pretty quickly. So yeah, I don't know, I'm sure it's like no one wants to take that approach of like scare tactics, but I mean, it is a scary thing. Like we spend tons of money and tons of time getting tattoos, and so yeah, it is like a heavy effect on the end user as well. But yeah, the right way to stimulate them is kind of hard to tell, because I mean, I'm like a super passionate like collector, but something I always admire about tattoo collectors is that like even someone with just like some small tattoo, they're the same as me. They went through the same experience. They found an artist, they booked it, they got tattooed. So it's kind of hard to speak to, because it is like several different personas similar to tattoo artists. There's people who are going to care a lot, and then there's the opposite of that, of someone who's like, I don't give a fuck, I'll go underground and make my own pigments and things like that. So yeah, I guess, yeah, again, comes back to unifying everybody, manufacturers, artists, collectors, all different types of personas, and really just about that end goal of protecting something that we love.
I think you hit on a real good point, and scare tactics, a truth, right? Like at the end of the day, right now we are in a recession, right? We're in the midst of a presidential election. It's affecting business. This is the first legitimate slow season in tattooing since I want to say like 2017, 2018, because the pandemic just ramped everybody up. New tattoo artists 5 years under are feeling it. Us older folks know how to navigate it. But I think that the truth is, if clients are concerned and they're not getting tattooed, throw in economic fluctuations, it's going to affect the tattoo artist, right? I know there's been like medical reports that have gone out that are basing their, I would just say like half-baked medical reports, or medical reports that are very vague, that people then base their sensationalist news articles or social media posts off of, that are driving clients away from tattooing because of their fear campaigns in the negative direction, right? Like we see this in APT where where artists are complaining that their clients are like saying, hey, like I don't feel comfortable now, right? And we need to share the truth that, hey, like it's because of our lack of action that there's a potential that it could be a danger to you if we get stuck using products we don't trust. If you're now forcing artists to go underground and minimizing their bloodborne pathogens training, right? Like no longer putting forth energy and effort into quality products and quality practices, right? That will affect the client. And I think that's somewhere that we haven't really focused on, specifically, kind of as we're talking about like flushing it out, like we haven't really been as adamant to go talk to clients that are true lovers of it and get their feedback, because there's always that like love of like, I love my artist, so I'll kind of do whatever he says, you know what I mean? Like, or she says, or whatever they tell me to do, whatever products they want me to use. Right. But there's a point where it's like, no, you need to start asking your artist these questions. Right. And at that point, you'll stimulate the artist to become more of a well-rounded practitioner, right? Not only just good at the quality of art, the health and safety of it, but the future of it, and it's political health, right? It's sovereignty. Will it be sovereign, or will it be just completely over-regulated, watered-down version of what we all love? Right. So I think there's something to be said about really focusing on the clients and getting their perspective. And I think it'd be great to know how many people get tattooed too.
Sorry to interrupt you, Ben. Forrest, you're a seasoned and educated collector at this point, but so this answer to my question might be a little skewed, but try to think back to when you first started getting tattooed, okay? And you weren't as knowledgeable about tattooing. How much trust did you have to put in that artist compared to how much trust you put in them today?
Yeah, I mean, early on, I definitely remember the nervousness initially of like nights before appointments, sort of scrolling through their Instagrams, making sure I made like the right decision. And it's definitely harder and at first to place that trust. It's a big risk, really. I'm giving them like a piece of my body, hoping that it turns out well. Like, especially being inexperienced, you really don't know anything. Like, I feel like it took me a solid 10 years of collecting to understand at a real level, like how tattooing works. And even the process still, every time I go to a new artist, it's like, you're kind of starting over in a way of like, all right, I got to trust them with this idea and their style and just their practices as well. You never really know. Everyone does things differently, which is like a beautiful thing about tattooing, that it can exist successfully in so many different ways. But a lot of that risk is placed on the client, not really knowing, and it's really hard to understand. It's a complicated process, but yeah, there is a lot of like anxiety. And thankfully, I enjoyed it enough that I was able to place that trust. But it is definitely a high level that you have to be able to trust your artists.
Yeah, it totally is. I mean, you're trusting them with everything, right? At that point,
Yeah.
But it's an interesting, Ben and Forrest, it's an interesting dichotomy, right? Like the client has to put a tremendous amount of trust into the artist, but at the same time, they don't want to upset that artist. They don't want to cross any lines with that artist. So how do we make them comfortable to ask the right questions to get the information they need to even put more trust into the artist? How do they ask those questions about the products they use? How do they ask questions about their history in tattooing or whatever it may be without actually offending the artist? So maybe that's a conversation that needs to be had within the group, is how do artists feel they should be approached not to be insulted or put off by their client before they actually tattoo them?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I feel like the artists, they know, but they don't know how to communicate it to the clients. But clients, they just don't even know what to ask. So that's like a big gap to bridge there. And yeah, it's not really, I mean, I feel like you see some more of that now of artists coming out about sort of creating content to put on their profile of like, this is about me, so they feel more comfortable. And then here's more about my process to help them understand like the questions to ask. But it's definitely not a uniform thing, that's for sure, across the industry.
Well, you mentioned like scrolling Instagram pages the night before employment and kind of gaining that confidence that you made the right decision too. So that's the other side of it, is how much anxiety, or I hate to use it, but how much fear does that client have prior to that appointment? And is that hampering them or pushing them back on asking the right questions that they need to ask to feel secure, but also to help the artist too? So that's another weird challenge or hurdle that we'd have to figure out getting over, for the client.
Yeah, it's almost like a position of power. Like clients don't want to speak up. They don't want to upset or hinder the process at all. It kind of is like, I guess the stigma, the pretty big, I guess just sort of, dynamic issue with that client artist relationship is how to make them comfortable to speak their minds. Because a lot of people don't, like, they're just gonna, even if they don't like the design, which is like a crazy thing I mean, I've never been in like that position, but it's a common story of like, just leaving the studio and hating it whenever they could have just spoken up and minimized a lot of the risk just by having a conversation.
Sure. Yeah. And that's no good for anybody's business, right? Well executed tattoo, a design that you love, and a client that hates it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Oh
that's
yeah. Yeah. No, I remember Guy Atchison. You know, for those who know, he's a legend. Walking up to a tattoo on somebody, going like, "That is awesome," which would be a huge compliment, and that person going like, "Oh yeah, it's all right," you know, like like they just had a negative perspective about that tattoo because of the situation they were in, the experience they had with the artist, which was garbage. So it really changed the whole process, which that's just not good business, right? Like that's not going to lead to a long time career. So, and I think that's probably just again flushing these things out in this conversation here would be a real good place to start pointing some information, content, and general information out to the general public too about the things they should be asking, and then answers that the artist should be giving them, right? You know, and then also that dynamic push for having the clients ask their artists, like, hey, are you involved with your trade organization? Are you participating in the future of tattooing? You know, are you getting are you working to safeguard the products and processes we love by engaging with your state's regulators or your congressmen or women? I think this would be a good angle to go at it because it does affect the safety. I mean, it allows clients to still get that safe product. It gives artists the ability to shine in a competitive realm. You know, like it's showing that they are putting forth that effort, right? And then shows the regulators that we are participating and active, right? You know, we are sharing our perspective. We are writing letters. We are showing up because we do believe the things we're doing have been working, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Maybe fine tune it as we go, but I think that's been a good piece pulled out of this conversation is to really look at that end user and how we can educate them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's pretty powerful, actually. So figuring out the delicacies around that, right? The slow steps, but that is definitely probably the most powerful piece that we could get out of all this is that engagement and that conversation that we could start between the client and the artist.
I mean, that's good. I mean, we're starting off with just trying to dissect an FDA draft guidance, and you know, we'll keep putting our finger on it. This won't be the last conversation about where this draft guidance will lead to when it comes to what regulations we're going to have to follow. But I definitely would love for a continued update from you, Sean, that we can then convey to the communities about what we need to be doing specifically, you know, whether it's letters or showing up to Capitol Hill or just, you know, logging into an online session that we could, you know, at least raise our hands or participate in. You know, I think that's huge.
Yeah.
And then from there, you know, like trickle that down and start using persons like Forrest, who's an experienced collector, to help us translate to the end user and how we can start those dialogues.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to like walk it back to that point actually of like, I guess, understanding the process to know what to expect and like how it will affect us. So yeah, just walking you back to like what exactly like the MoCRA draft guidance is. Is it kind of like they put out these drafts for like another round of discourse, and then eventually it leads to their ruling, and all of like what MoCRA is doing affects the manufacturing, and maybe down the road they'd focus on practitioners. So I guess I'm just curious about like what to expect of the process and steps of MoCRA, and then I guess the direct impact.
Yeah. So I'll take a little bit of that. So MoCRA's law, right? It's there. It's fully active right now, right? We had to register, do GMP, safety substantiation, the whole gamut, right? All those pieces. It's done into law. Now the FDA, they've been tasked with, they have to go and write a final rule. How are they going to enforce that law? What parts of the law are they going to enforce? It's like any other government agency. they've been tasked with actually writing the rule. When they write that rule, that will become the law. Okay, so when that final rule hits, now I believe they have until the end of December of 2025 to get that done. So what they first have to do before they issue any kind of documents like this final guidance that just came out, they have to issue a draft guidance and open up a public comment time period, right? So they have to get as much public comment as possible to say that they engaged with the public and the industry, and they've decided that this is going to be their final rule or guidance or whatever it is they're putting out. So that's what we just saw. They just issued the final guidance on tattoo manufacturing for ink, right? And that's what we just saw hit just a few days ago. Now what we could expect sometime early next year is a draft on their final rule, unless they pivot and decide they need to write more guidance. And then they get Congress to give them more time, right? So they could always ask for an extension. They did that during the MoCRA situation last year, right? Or this year, sorry. They gave the industry 6 more months to comply with the registration process. And I believe it was to give them more time to figure out how they're going to get all these people, not just the tattoo industry, but all these different companies to register in a short period of time. So they developed a new web page, a new platform, all that stuff, and then they put it out and gave us till July of this year to do it. So that's possible too. They could ask Congress for an extension. But as of right now, they have to have that final rule done at the end of December 2025. So next December.
Wow. So we're getting down to like our last chances of like stating our opinions and like participating in this discourse.
Well, we have to wait to do any comments until they issue the draft, right?
Yeah.
So the draft has to be public first, then we can start issuing comments. However, between now and then, we could be making noise. Hey, we're here. We're not a bunch of degenerate, tattoo artists. We're not just the tattoo industry. We know what we're doing. We've been regulating ourselves for thousands of years, but we've been regulating ourselves, and everybody's fine, and there's no health crisis. So we could be making that noise right now. Now, early next year, hopefully when we see the draft, that's the time to really put the rubber to the road and get all the comments in that we can. As many comments as possible need to happen, right? On how we feel as a tattoo industry, we're going to be affected by this final rule of MoCRA.
You're so in it, Sean, that it's like the logistics of how it all works is so like you mentioned, there's these rules and these statutes, and now there's comment periods, and then it's like, but how I like to personally coming at it from like a 5th grader, right? When the president signed a federal law, MoCRA is a federal law, right? And a law is very vague. The FDA or the government needs to regulate cosmetics, and tattooing is a cosmetic. That's it. You're like, okay, how? How the fuck are we going to do that? Well, then that's when the FDA says, all right, well, here's an idea. Here's a draft guidance. Like, we're thinking this. What do you think? We're going to take this very vague law and we're going to make little rules out of it, right? And it's these little rules that tell you if you did right or bad, right? That's what those individual draft guidance are, ideas for those rules that we'll have to follow. The fact that they said, hey, here's this rule, what do you think? And we're like, well, we don't like this and we don't like this, let's fix that. And they're all like, that's nice. We're still going to go do it. Shows that we don't have enough people and say like, we don't like that. We want that to change. We need more. We need this to change that. And we want to make sure that rule that we're going to have to follow to the T makes sense for us. And that rule that we have to follow to the T for us will affect what we can use. And if we can't use the products that we know and trust, and they make us use products we don't know or trust, well, that's going to affect the tattoo artist paying more money and using crappier products, right? We may not be able to, our prices are going to go up. Our colorful dynamic tattoos are going to disappear, right? And then eventually that shit's going into you. That's like going into your body, right? That's the stuff you're going to look at and say like, I like it or I don't like it. And if we get stuck using the same stuff that Europe has to use, that could potentially make you sick, because it was in Europe. In Germany, they recalled it all. So from that staunch, very vague law to the rules, to the practitioners, to you, like it's like funneling down into you the worst, right? Like it's making the most effect on you, right? So I think it's important to realize that we've been here for so long, but we really need to get over here and say, like, y'all are the ones that are truly going to be affected, right? It's going into your body, and from there, that's as simple as we can make it, because then it gets fucking more and more and more complicated, convoluted. People get involved.
Yeah, I mean, it funnels down, and that's the most severe level is the client, and it funnels back up too.
Yeah,
so it's a two-way street, you know. So we all got to help each other out because we deserve the right to get tattooed, like that. That's just in our human DNA right there. I'll give you a real-world example real quick. The state of Texas made this crazy law in the late '90s about tattooing and the practice of, and then they gave it to this Department of Health, Texas Department of Health. Texas Department of Health said, we can't, there you go, we can't do this because it's too hard to actually regulate. So instead, they said, instead of every tattoo artist having a license in the state of Texas, we're going to say every tattoo shop has to have a license, and those tattoo artists will work under it, which in turn, that became the rule, the law. So now in Texas, every shop has to be having a license. Artists don't have it, which shifts the responsibility to the shop, and the artists do something they shouldn't, right? And gives artists zero responsibility. So that's how laws and rules could be affected. You know, law says artists have to have it. Rule says nope, shops have to have it. Same thing here, right? On a federal level, the FDA could come back and say, tattooing has to do this. Tattooing has to use these ingredients, or has to take away 4,000 substances and use stuff that they haven't used in 200 years and see if it works. So that's where it becomes vitally important that we continue this conversation and have some civil discourse over it. So we get down to the most creative and best solution for the industry.
Yeah. We didn't even get into how tattoo artists operate and the accountability there. That's a whole other conversation. But
it's always the ink's fault. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's always the ink's fault. It's never the application of a tattoo, ever. Or aftercare. It's never the aftercare either.
Yeah.
Ask any physician out there, they'll tell you.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know that, like, even for the people who like don't understand, like, maybe the process of the legislation, I feel like that's a good, not finish line, just like end goal of December 2025, that like, that's when the decision is going to get made. And I don't think anyone wants REACH compliant inks for Christmas next year. So like, that's a good thing of like, now is the, like, even if they don't understand the draft guidance and like creating the rules, at least like that is a good, I guess, like, goal to work towards, of like, get our shit together before then, because it's coming. Like, we're basically a year away.
Yeah. And the last comment on this final guidance that got issued, it's not difficult for the manufacturers to comply with. I should say most of them probably. Okay. That's not what worries me. What's keeping me up over this is there's telltale signs within that final guidance that are probably going to be in the rules. And the fact that they didn't take any suggestions from industry or the trade or even the public. Those are the pieces that worry me about this one. So, and those are the pieces we need to kind of keep our eye on, right? So why aren't they listening to the experts? Why aren't they listening to the public? We need to gather all that evidence and find that out. And then we need to ask them. We need to flat out ask the FDA why, and see if they'll respond to us. And then that's what we take to the Hill. That's what we take to the streets. That's what we take to the shops, and really start that buzz about.
Yeah, that's a great call to action, right? Yeah, there you go. That's a great way to tie it up. So thanks so much, Sean, for all the work you do behind the scenes. Many times appreciate what you do. I think tattooing owes you a debt of gratitude, but I know you don't do it for that because it's one of those.
No, I owe tattooing the debt of gratitude. There's a difference there.
There you go.
So, I appreciate both of you too. So you guys are doing awesome work. Keep it up.
We're trying. Well, remember, this is affecting us all from the top down and then the down up, right? tattooers to clients to everywhere in between. It's important that we start getting this information out, start sharing this. So if this information, we can edit however you like, but this information makes it to social media. If this information hits right and you feel like it's worthy of sharing, please share it with somebody that tattooing touches, because now it's half the population are getting tattooed. So we want to make sure that you're able to get the tattoos that you like, love, that are healthy and safe. And, we all continue to work together to keep tattooing amazing for many years to come. So thank you guys for your time. And until next time, insert off the statement, punch the screen if.
Sean, is there anywhere you want to like send people or give them any information about how to get in contact with you or anything like that?
For me, APT right now is a place to go. And if you're a collector or a tattoo artist, I would definitely recommend the APT. It's grown leaps and bounds in the past year and a half, which is quite amazing. If you're part of the industry in any other way, then definitely AFDO as well, the Alliance of Food and Drug Officials. It's important to have a voice there because that's where they discuss all the products and product safety and talk to all the health inspectors and the regulators. But if you're definitely a client, then APT and an artist.
Yeah, love that. APT has been around since 1992, the Tattoo Artists Trade Organization, built by tattoo artists to protect, educate, and unify the tattoo community. Soundbite.